Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven development video. I'm recording this on April 4th, 2012, and before we get started I want to remind you all about the Art of Agile bootcamp that I'm putting on in New York City on the last week of April. That's April 23rd to the 27th. This is a really great course that covers all aspects of Agile from start to finish, from planning to delivery, and of course the planning happens throughout. It's not just do planning then delivery, as we all know. It's plan, deliver, deliver, and we actually do that in the course. We deliver real working software programmed in Java or another language if you prefer in 90-minute iterations. It's a really neat course, and I hope you'll attend. You can find out more at artofagilegyc.com, and I hope to see you there. So let's go ahead and get started on our episode for today. When we left off, we were working on thoroughly testing the warning dialog, and that was actually coming along pretty smoothly, except that we ran into the problem of how do we test the message, and that was a little frustrating. The whole thing has been a little frustrating. But I think what we're going to have to do there is go in and poke into the dialog box through Swing. And Esko Luantala in the comments had a great suggestion about that. So let's take a look. He said he actually went into the Swing code, which is pretty cool, and suggested that we need to call get content pane and get the component and cast in JOption pane called get message. So let's do that. That's a little more convenient than what I thought was going to happen, which was I thought we were going to have to go into the JOption pane and actually drill down into the internal components of it and find a text string or something like that. So this looks a little bit better than what it could have been. So let's try that. We're going to have to do some serious refactoring here, but he's saying if we cast the dialog into a J dialog, which we can just do right here, and call get content pane, and then get the component from that. Eclipse takes a little while to sort through all of Swing's stuff. Presumably, we're just going to ask for the 0 component. That should be our dialog pane. And from there, we should be able to call get message. Let's give that a shot. Oh, well, that's interesting. Huh. Frame should have just been disposed. What has happened here? So let me try taking this back out. Do we have a compiler error? No. Saying the dialog's not visible. Interesting. That was just a race condition. Apparently 1,000 milliseconds wasn't quite enough time, given that this is the first time I've run the tests. I'm not going to worry about that. I could increase that timeout, but I don't think I need to right now. All right, so if I call dialog pane.getMessage, everything fails, or does it? Maybe that's just, again, that timeout stuff. Yeah, that was a timeout from this being the first time I ran the tests. It's too bad I didn't look at that more closely. This is the kind of thing that happens whenever you do test-driven development. You eventually run across obscure cases that only show up once in a while, and it's really tempting to just let them go. But then they start building up and building up and building up until you get to the point where 1 out of 3 of your tests runs fails, or 1 out of 2, or sometimes you have to run the test 3 times before they pass. And you know that whatever the problem is probably not real production error, but it takes you forever to do a complete test run, because typically in this environment it takes you minutes, tens of minutes as well to do your tests. And it's a really slippery slope. You get to the point where you just can't rely on your tests anymore, and it's really frustrating to work with that kind of problem. It always happens in any real production test-driven development environment, because you know that the problem is not really a production problem, or you suspect it isn't. I had one of the early projects I worked on had a lot of database access. We didn't have. That was one of my very first test-driven development projects, and we didn't have the best strategy that we could have. And we had 1,500 tests, 1,600 tests, and they took about 20, 30 minutes, which was just barely short enough for us to not put a lot of effort into making them shorter. Nowadays, I get uncomfortable if they take more than 5 minutes and start shrinking them when they're 10 minutes. But then I wasn't quite as aggressive. Anyway, the tests got to the point where we'd get these weird connection errors every other test run, and it would take us 45 minutes or more to do an integration, which was no good because we were doing synchronous integration. We had to wait for the test to integrate before we moved on to the next thing, which was actually probably our saving grace. If we had used asynchronous integration with a build server where you check in and then you go on to something else, I don't think we ever would have taken the initiative to actually solve the problem. But it turned out that we had an honest-to-goodness connection leak in our production code. We thought it was a spurious test failure. Oh, no, it wasn't a connection leak. There was a race condition in our connection logic that the test, because they were so stressed the system so much, exposed. And we eventually fixed it and never had another spurious failure like that. And it really was a good thing for our production code. But it took us months to actually get around to trying to dig into it, and to the point where we were seeing more test runs fail than pass, because these race condition sort of issues are just frustrating. They're really hard to reproduce. They feel like they're not important, and so forth. Anyway, so setting that story aside, my point is I don't want to ignore an issue like that where we're seeing a failure that only happens once in a while. That said, it's not a pressing issue, so I want to just sort of keep it in the back of my mind if it happens again. It could be a sign of something really wrong in the production code, or it could just be a sign of, of when things first spin up, there's a bit of an issue. I don't know. It's something to keep in mind. The trick is with this video series, because it takes so long to produce an hour of video. That's 2 weeks of episodes. It's harder for me to keep these things top of mind like it would if it was a real programming project. Anyway, enough dilly-dallying. Let's see this thing work. Expected could not save file, generic exception, but was foo. Esco, thank you so much for that information. That made this really easy. I'm going to have to do some refactoring, but this looks perfect. It just worked. I think we would have spent the whole episode on this, and as it was, I got to tell a story instead. So thank you for that. I think I think we can just do that. We'll just use this message like that, and I think that will work. Yeah, awesome. All right. Oh, and looks like I'm not running all my tests because I ran a subset in the last episode. So let's run all of them just to make sure. Oh, that is just great. That is great. All right. So the remaining thing we have to do is we have to force the correct error message, and hopefully dialog pane will give us access to that as well. We've got get message. Icon, get icon. That's get message type. Perfect. So we need to say assert equals warning dialog type should be warning. I need to specify it because it's what we're comparing to is an int, and the message won't be clear otherwise. And then we'll say JOption pane dot warning message. Should be warning expected to was 0. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we've got the message, we've got the title, or that's duplicate. Oh, that is great. Okay, let's run this for real. Make sure everything's working the way we think it ought to be. Of course, we've got that delete me as a read-only file, so we're getting an error, and it's coming up the way I would expect. That's cool. That's great. I think from a functionality perspective, we're done here. Yeah. Cool beans. Okay, so now let's do some refactoring. So the tests need a lot of work, but we also need to just double check our production code. That, of course, was just commented out. That shouldn't hurt. This all looks okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah, that's pretty clean. Okay, now for the test. These are not quite so clean. This warning dialog or null if not found is pretty clunky. I wonder, I've got this get parent, get title. I wonder if we can just get the dialog pane and ask questions of that. Maybe. Probably not, though, because the parent is going to be the content pane, so I don't think that's what we want. And there's no get title. So, yeah, so I think we'll rename this to be dialog window, and that to dialog pane, and then yeah, that's pretty clean. This whole test, though, is really huge. So we've got the mocking happening here. I could make this simpler by using a mocking framework, I think. I don't know if the burden, though, the complexity burden of using a mocking framework is that opposed to this, which is pretty easy for somebody who's new to the code to understand, you can look at this and see what's going on. If you're using a mocking framework, now the burden of understanding is bigger. Now they have to understand the code that's written here and also understanding the mocking framework. That's why I try to avoid using third-party libraries unless they're solving a fairly significant problem. So I don't think I want to go with a mocking framework yet. This just isn't that complicated, and it's not that much space. So there's definitely some work to be done in terms of cleanup, and that's what we'll pick up with next time. So thanks for watching, everybody. I will catch you next time.